like that, where one walks in the world without interfering in the world. That's how
without interfering.
Interfering in others.
That's one of my, one of my deep natures is being a Taoist.
Yes, I heard that too.
And there is this Taoist, as kind of one of the things I have written on my mirror. You have those. What are they called? I've never quite affirmations. Yeah. So when you shave in the morning, you.
I don't usually.
No, nor do I. But that's right. It's very, very affirming. And it's this saying which is, less and less is done until nothing is done. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. The world cannot be ruled by interfering. Yeah? So that's that really answers both questions, because that is for me what it is to be a minimalist. It is to do as little as possible. And if you do as little as possible, you try not to interfere, you try just to allow things to take their course, and that is... And somehow what's going to happen is going to happen, and what isn't going to happen isn't going to happen, and...
It's like it's flowing with the Tao. Is that this flow with the river?
Yeah. It was interesting because I was thinking a lot about what this gentleman yesterday was asking about. Why is it this moment in time? And I probably didn't answer it correctly or as fully as I could. And because at about 5 o'clock this morning, I was meditating and then thinking about that, and then I realized, because somewhere, if you look closely, if you sense, there are signs. In our tradition, we're taught to read the signs. There is this saying in the Quran, actually, He has placed His signs on the horizons and in themselves, that they may know He is the real. And a lot of Sufi training is learning how to read the signs in the inner world and the outer world. In our tradition, we work with dreams a lot, because dreams are signs, in the same way that Adya was saying yesterday he'd noticed in movies. They were telling another subliminal story, these kind of apocalyptic movies. And that if you kind of listen within, also look without, not with a judgmental consciousness, not with any fixed idea, because part of learning to listen to the signs is learning to have a receptive consciousness, this feminine quality of just looking and watching. On a little bit of a sideline, I was very, very moved when the tsunami happened. Some people have heard me say this. There is a sea tribe there called, I think, the Mekan, and they live in that area, and they have very few possessions. They live on these boats in the sea. Interestingly, they don't actually have any concept of time. It just isn't in their vocabulary. They live very much in the present, but at the same time, they were the only people who noticed the signs of what was going to happen. Those people who were on their boats, they saw the dolphins were swimming to deeper water. And they remembered in their ancestral memories that meant they should also go to deeper water. And there was this very, kind of tragic thing. There were the Burmese fishermen there, and they were, they were fishing for whatever it is close to the shore there, and what the Mekan sailors said, or the Mekan people, they said that the Burmese fishermen weren't attentive. They weren't looking at the signs. And so they didn't notice what was happening. And so when the tsunami came, they all got killed, their boats were all destroyed. But they saw the signs, and so the moment they saw the dolphins swimming to deeper water, it's something, they were attentive, and they took their boats and they went to deeper water. So when the tsunami came, they weren't actually wiped out. Their boats rode the waves in the deeper water rather than the very strong waves that came crashing into the ground. And so in our tradition, we're taught to be attentive to the signs. And one of the difficulties at the moment is that the signs are changing. That's why I wrote a book about it called The Signs of God. It was the old signs don't work anymore. The signs you used to look for, how to live a good spiritual life, how to do it properly, they don't work anymore. The signs are changing, and you have to be, and there isn't a book. You can't look at the signs and then go to your almanac and say this means this. You have to really access your own deep inner wisdom, this knowing that comes from far deeper than judgmental consciousness. And if you go into this space, this attentiveness, this awareness of the inner and the outer worlds, you will notice that something is changing. I can tell you a little bit about how I notice it, but it isn't, that's just me. It is like, I remember writing about it a few years ago, and that I saw that I called them the magical unicorns that used to live in the forest have come out of the forest for the first time in many millennia. There are certain currents that are present in the inner and the outer world that haven't been present here for a long time. And you kind of, if you like, it's like being an old-fashioned sailor. You kind of sniff the wind, or an old farmer, you smell the air and you see that a storm is coming. And it isn't in the weather forecast. Because remember, our weather forecasts just tell us about this temporal reality, about this world of the grooves that Adya was talking about. They're just in a way more grooves. But if you learn to listen, to be attentive, then you'll see something is happening. I call it the world is waking up. And it's asking certain people to be part of it. It's like sending out messages. You can't read them with rational consciousness. One of the reasons I was talking about light yesterday is that in a way, certain light within the world is talking to the light within us if we can actually stop what we're doing for a moment and listen to it. And to me, one of the importances of meditation is learning to have a discipline of being receptive, of being attentive, of just watching these currents. And there are extraordinary things happening. They're happening at the moment just behind the scenes. And if we can dare to be present, not in this apparent world around us, which looks like a complete disaster, which looks like a complete mess that's getting worse. And this is actually part of the seductive play of the illusions. I don't know how many people are aware of it, that if you like, the dying world is asking us to look at it because it has so many problems. It wants us to have our attention fixated on its death throes. Like Adya was saying on whether we rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. You know, if we do in this pattern, then we can save something. And it is this grip, this fascination, because always remember, darkness is much more fascinating than light. Darkness holds our attention much more closely than light. But if for a moment we can step out of that, if we can turn our attention away from this fixation with what is happening, and we can learn to look somewhere else. I've repeated to our group a number of times this line from one of Shakespeare's plays, The Winter's Tale, which I always find very moving at this time, which is, somebody says, "Now I came upon things dying and thou upon things newborn." And it's like, where do you look? Are you looking at what is dying? And what is dying is very visible around us. And what is interesting is that this is also very similar in our own process, because we get so fixated by our ego consciousness, and particularly when the ego consciousness starts to fall apart, we kind of cling to those bits of the shipwreck longingly, you know, like keeping old memories alive. And do we dare to allow something to fall away? It's like one of the things that you have to do on the path, in my understanding, is to allow the old concepts, the old ego to fall away, and not to be kind of trying to rearrange those deck chairs. And can we instead just say, okay, this is happening, it's terrible, there are